I'm about to, so I'm going to hand over in a second to Hannah Sloane. For those who need reminding, Hannah is an international musician. She spends most of her time outside of the crisis playing on stages across the world as a cellist, as part of orchestras mainly and smaller musical ensembles. She performs globally, and she's a graduate of the Juilliard School, which is one of the foremost music schools in the world. Trained in, I think, New York, and yeah, she does music for a living. It's fantastic to see you and to have you with us. It's a real honour. It's the first time we've done anything like this, and I'm thrilled. So welcome, Hannah, and I'll hand you the mic now, and I'll turn myself off for a bit and just enjoy what you're going to bring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Hi everyone. It's so nice to be here, and thanks Craig so much for the introduction, and thank you Joe and Craig for working on this and making this possible. It's the first time you've had something like this, and it's definitely the first time I've done something like this, so I'm really thrilled to be here playing for you. And one thing that I just wanted to say is that I tuned into the webinar last week when Mark Stevenson was talking, and I thought I would just come in for 5 minutes and just see how it would work, and then I'd sign off and go back to practicing and, you know, isolating and everything. And I stayed for the whole hour because I was just completely blown away by how interesting what he was talking about was, and also how interesting all of your questions were. And I was sitting there the whole time kind of researching what the social club does and what Mark Stevenson does, and loads of your organisations. And so I just wanted to say it's a real honour for me to be here, and thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing in the community all the time, but especially at this time. It's just really been incredibly inspirational for me, outside of my little bubble of musicians, to see some of the work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much, and I think this concert really is mostly to say thank you. I'm just going to briefly introduce myself now and what I do, and then I've got kind of 3 big sets of live playing and 1 very small clip of a video, and I'll kind of introduce as I go along, and then at the end I'll leave a little bit of time if anybody's got any questions or wants to follow up on anything. So I won't talk too long, because I know we're all here to experience music together. But I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Hannah, and I predominantly, when I'm not in lockdown, I'm a chamber musician, and which means that I play in small chamber ensembles. I have a string quartet, which is 4 string players, and I travel around to different chamber music festivals. That's across the UK and often further afield as well. And I trained in New York, but I live in Sussex with my fiance, and we're locking down here. And like so many musicians, I've lost my colleagues really, because we're all having to isolate in our homes. So that's really kind of brought me to this recital, because normally I don't play just solo cello music. I'm playing quartets and symphonies and, you know, collaborative groups. But there's a lot of music for solo cello, and it's really wonderful, and it's stuff that I learned more when I was studying, actually, and when I was younger, when I was a teenager and just starting to get really serious about the cello. So I came back to work on this piece of music by Johann Sebastian Bach. He wrote 6 cello suites, and I'm going to play the first cello suite for you today. It's in G major, and the prelude is quite famous. So it's appeared on a lot of TV programs, The West Wing and various others. So hopefully you'll recognise the first movement. Bach wrote these suites all in a row. There are 6 of them, and each one lasts about half an hour. So they're really the cornerstone of the cello repertoire. And the structure of the suites is that they are written in 7 movements, and I'm going to play the first 3 movements for you now. The prelude, and then the allemande, which is kind of a slowish dance in 4, and then the courante, which is a quick dance in 3, and then I'll talk about that music after that. Thank you. It's very funny to see everyone clapping but not hear them. But thanks very much. That's my first set of stuff that I was going to play, and just anybody that came in a little bit late. That was the prelude and allemande and courante of the first suite by J.S. Bach. And there are 6 in total, and this G major suite is it's sort of my favourite, I think. It's the one that I learned first when I was little, and lots of my students now are learning that piece, so it's a very nice thing to return to in lockdown. This brings me to my next piece, which is completely different, really. It's by a composer called Zoltán Kodály, who was born in the 1890s in Hungary and lived until 1967. And he lived through both world wars in Hungary, which my teacher always told me whenever I was learning Kodály. He said the thing you have to remember is that these Hungarian composers are composers that watched the tanks come through Hungary many times in their life. And I always thought that was a great turn of phrase when sort of remembering the collective consciousness that Hungarian composers would feel. This piece is relatively early on in Kodály's life that he wrote, and it's a sonata for solo cello. He would have been very influenced, I think, by the Bach suites. The truth is, Bach wrote his suites in probably the 1720s, and then not much else is written for the solo cello until about the 1920s. So there's a real gap there. And Kodály wrote this sonata for solo cello, but unlike most pieces, he decides to tune the cello in a slightly different way. So the piece that I've just played you, and all pieces for cello really, have the strings tuned C, G, D and A. And what Kodály decides to do is he decides to tune the G string down to an F sharp, and the C string down to a B. So those are now the open strings of the cello. And even when I just play just the open strings, suddenly the cello sounds a completely different instrument, much bigger, much darker and more brooding. So this piece is altogether less cheerful, I think, than the Bach, but still very beautiful and very soulful. Kodály wrote this piece in 1915 during the First World War, and it had to wait till after the end of the First World War to have its premiere. So this was a piece that was conceived in in a time of lockdown, not like this one really, but in its own sort of constrictions. And I must be honest, it's quite difficult, this piece, and it wasn't until lockdown that I took the time to actually learn it. I've been making all of my students learn it for the past couple of years, and I've never really actually had I'm sure I've had the time, but I've never sat down and learned it until now. So one very nice aspect of lockdown for me is going back to solo repertoire that maybe gets sidelined when I'm working and when I'm touring. Anyway, I'm going to play the first movement of Kodály's solo sonata. Thank you. Thanks very much. Um, I just wanted for my next thing, I'm just going to play a very little amount of this, but just before I do, I just wanted to I just wanted to share a little bit about my string quartet, which is my job when I'm not in lockdown. And I thought very carefully about what I was going to say, because I thought that this event, I did very much want it to be a break for you all from the sort of crisis of lockdown. But I listened to what Mark said last week about the ladder of truth, which I thought was just so brilliant, actually, all the 5 steps. And the first step to collaborating and making things better is to kind of share your story. And so I hope you won't mind. I'd like to just share a little bit about what's happening for musicians in this crisis. Normally, I'm at this time of the year, I'm travelling around to different chamber music festivals. So one chamber music festival that I should have been at, I think actually even today, is Fitzfest, which is a chamber music festival in Fitzrovia. There's another one in Lewis that my quartet was due to be going to, the Aldborough Festival, which is in Snape Maltings, the Oundle Festival later in July, the Arcadia Festival in Shropshire in September, all cancelled. There's just no way to safely deliver live music at the moment. And that's extraordinarily frightening for musicians, really. Angela Merkel said recently that she thinks it will be 18 months, really, before concert halls can open again. And so we're faced with having to be very creative. And it's right that we should, and we're all figuring out ways to maybe broadcast things and to figure out how to get together as musicians, even if the audience can't come, and that's all moving forward now, which is exciting and a part of it. But I think that the main point that musicians have really realised is that playing music is for us as musicians to get together and play music, but more importantly, it's for you guys, for the audience to come and be with us, and that we can all have a collective experience live, not over technology. And I think that there's obviously a need to not do that whilst we're in the middle of this crisis. But I think once we're through the other side, I think what the musical community has really learned is that we shouldn't value our greatest asset. We shouldn't undervalue our greatest asset, which is that we can't really be replicated by technology. Concerts can't really, I mean, they can, obviously, and today is a good example of a good try, but I think we have to look forward to going back to a very, very old form of human interaction. And I just thought that I would mention that, because it seems that you're all doing such amazing work in your communities, and I think that if collaboration is what comes out of this crisis, then that will be a great thing for many industries. And so just kind of as a tribute to them, my string quartet is called the Eusebius String Quartet, and I would have been travelling around the country with them at the moment, but I just thought that it might be nice to play this video that we made 18 months ago in Snape Maltings when we were there. And this is the first movement of, or as an extract of the first movement of Schumann's second string quartet in F major. And I'm now going to do something clever to try and show you this video. So there it is. And I can now share my screen. Hello, we're the Eusebius Quartet, and we've been here at Snape Maltings for 2 weeks doing residency. We've just spent 3 wonderful days working with Rita Wagner on the quartets of Bartók and Schumann. Thank you. Thanks. And that's just given me time to tune my cello back up, and I'll play. I'll finish my playing by playing the last three movements of this very beautiful suite by Bach, and then open up for discussion. The movements are this now that I'm going to play are the sarabande, which is a slow dance in 3, and then 2 minuets, which are quick dances in 3, and then a jig. And actually, within this Baroque dance suite, the jig is the only one. All the movements come from different countries in Europe, and the jig is the one that comes from the UK. So we'll be finishing with that. Thank you everyone so much. It's so nice to, brilliant, the emoji, the clapping emoji. Thanks very much, thanks so much for having me. If anybody would like to ask any questions or anything, I've left a bit of time for that. So.
Could you unmute me? Thanks, Joe. Hannah, thank you. I loved all of that. It was wonderful.